high school who had bands, and I got into a couple bands in high school. And then after that, I actually
At 76 years old, she walks onto the stage in black lace, tambourine in hand, and the crowd still loses its mind. But behind the velvet shawls and spinning silhouette is a woman who once believed she might not survive her own success before the platinum albums, before the sold-out stadiums, before she became the mystical voice of a generation. She was just a girl sleeping on a mattress on the floor, wondering if she had made the worst decision of her life. Stevie Nicks wasn't born into fame. She wasn't handed opportunity. In fact, at one point, she and her partner were so broke they lived on fast food and borrowed hope. And yet, she would go on to become one of the most influential women in rock history. But here's what most people don't know. The fame almost destroyed her. The love nearly broke her. The drugs nearly killed her. And the loneliness that never fully left. This is not just a story about music. It's about obsession, sacrifice, addiction, control, heartbreak, and the price of being the woman everyone wanted, but no one truly understood. Because sometimes, the woman who looks the most magical on stage is fighting the darkest battles often, and Stevie's battle was only just beginning. Long before the chiffon and candlelit stages, she was a quiet child with a powerful imagination. Born in 1948 in Arizona, Stevie moved constantly because of her father's corporate career, new schools, new cities, new expectations. She learned early how to reinvent herself, but never quite felt like she belonged. Music became her hiding place. Her grandfather introduced her to country and folk songs before she was 5. She didn't just sing them, she disappeared into them. On stage at school recitals, she wasn't shy anymore. She was commanding, confident, different. But off stage, she felt invisible. By high school, she had already decided she would be famous. Not maybe, not if. It was a certainty in her mind. That certainty would become both her superpower and her curse. When she met Lindsey Buckingham, everything intensified. He saw her talent. She believed in his genius. Together, they formed a musical bond that felt destined. But destiny doesn't pay rent, and for years, they struggled. Record labels passed. Critics dismissed them. They were told she wasn't commercial enough, that her voice was too strange, that she should consider backup singing instead. She refused. She would not shrink herself to fit someone else's idea of marketable. But holding that line would cost her more than she could imagine. Everything changed with a phone call. In 1974, Fleetwood Mac was searching for a new guitarist. Lindsey was invited to join, but he had one condition. Stevie came with him. The band hesitated. To unknown Americans, risky, but they agreed. That decision didn't just change the band, it changed rock history. Their 1975 self-titled album exploded. Suddenly, Stevie wasn't the struggling dreamer anymore. She was the voice behind hits like Rhiannon, a song that transformed her into something almost mythical. Audiences were hypnotized. The flowing dresses, the spinning movements, the haunting vocals. She wasn't just singing, she was casting spells. But while the world saw magic, the band was unraveling behind the scenes. Romantic relationships within the group were collapsing. Affairs, jealousy, betrayal. Every rehearsal felt like emotional warfare. And yet, somehow, they created one of the greatest albums of all time. Rumors wasn't just music, it was therapy set to melody. Every lyric was real. Every harmony carried resentment. Stevie and Lindsey were breaking up while singing love songs together. Imagine standing inches away from your ex night after night, pouring heartbreak into microphones while millions watched. Success had arrived, but peace had vanished, and the pressure was just getting started. By the late 1970s, Stevie Nicks wasn't just famous, she was iconic. Her solo album Belladonna proved she didn't need anyone to shine. Edge of 17 became an anthem. Her independence was undeniable, but fame is not freedom. It is surveillance. Every outfit dissected, every relationship analyzed, every pound gained criticized. And then came the drugs. Cocaine wasn't an accident. It was everywhere. Backstage, in studios, at parties. It made long nights easier, made exhaustion disappear, made insecurity feel manageable. Until a DIDN single quote Stevie later admitted she spent millions on cocaine. Millions. She believed it fueled her creativity. In reality, it was slowly dismantling her health. Friends worried, bandmates noticed, but the machine of success kept moving. Tour, record, interview, repeat. There's a specific kind of loneliness that comes with being worshipped by strangers. You're adored, but rarely known, and Stevie began to realize something terrifying. The character she had created on stage was becoming more powerful than the woman behind it. And she didn't know how to separate the two. In the mid-1980s, the cracks widened. Exhaustion, anxiety, emotional instability. The cocaine use had damaged her nasal passages so severely doctors warned her it could become fatal. She finally quit. But quitting cocaine led her into something even more dangerous, a prescription sedative called Klonopin. At first, it seemed harmless. It calmed her, helped her sleep, slowed her racing thoughts, but it also numbed her creativity. For nearly 8 years, she lived in a fog. She gained weight, lost motivation, felt disconnected from music. The very thing that defined her felt unreachable. She later described that period as losing herself completely. Imagine building your identity on being powerful, mystical, unstoppable, and then waking up one day unable to write a single lyric. The world still saw Stevie Nicks, but inside, she felt hollow. It would take rehab, therapy, and brutal honesty to reclaim her mind. And even then, some scars would never fully heal. Some love stories don't conclude, they echo, and hers echoed for decades. Her relationship with Lindsey Buckingham was never simple. It wasn't just romance, it was fusion. Two ambitious artists colliding at exactly the wrong and right time. They built their dreams together long before the world was watching. They starved together, struggled together, believed together, and then they broke. But creative chemistry doesn't disappear just because romance does. When they joined Fleetwood Mac, the tension only intensified. They weren't just ex-lovers. They were songwriting partners forced to harmonize inches apart, night after night. Every reunion tour reopened wounds that never fully healed. Every live performance of Silver Springs felt less like nostalgia and more like confrontation. The lyrics weren't just poetry, they were memory, accusation, regret. Fans saw passion on stage. They didn't see the emotional landmines backstage, the silence, the side glances, the decades of unresolved words. Stevie later admitted she never married because she feared losing herself inside someone else's world. She had watched her mother give up parts of her identity for family, and she quietly vowed she wouldn't repeat that story. But independence carries a cost. She once confessed that if she had chosen marriage and children, she might not have survived. The chaos of rock and roll, the tours, the temptations, the instability. So she chose music. Always music. And that choice built her legacy, but it also built a certain solitude, because sometimes protecting your independence means sacrificing the comfort of permanence. Time doesn't slow for legends. It simply changes the rhythm. As the decades passed, Stevie watched entire chapters of her life close. Friends she once toured with disappeared. Collaborators who helped shape her sound were suddenly gone. The wild chaos of the 1970s faded into memory, replaced by quieter reflections. The death of bandmates shook her deeply. Each loss felt like a piece of shared history dissolving. Songs that once felt electric now carried ghosts within them, and the world around her transformed. Vinyl turned into cassettes, cassettes into CDs, CDs into streaming. The industry she conquered no longer looked the same. Younger artists emerged, trends shifted, attention span shortened. Many legends fade during that transition. She didn't. She adapted. Her later performances were no longer about spinning endlessly under stage lights. They were about presence, stillness, authority. Her voice deepened with age, carrying more weight, more gravel, more lived experience. She wasn't trying to compete with youth. She was embodying survival. She stepped into the role of rock's elder stateswoman, not clinging to the past, but honoring it. Her storytelling sharpened. Interviews became more reflective. There was less mystique, more honesty, but grief never leaves cleanly. It lingers between verses, in the pause before a chorus, in the way she closes her eyes on certain notes. And yet, she kept walking onto that stage, because performing wasn't just habit. It wasn't ego. It was survival. As long as she could sing, she could process. As long as she could perform, she could heal. And that stage became less of a spotlight and more of a sanctuary. By her 70s, Stevie Nicks had nothing left to prove, and yet, she kept proving people wrong. The industry once labeled her mystical, almost reducing her to flowing fabric and symbolism. But behind the shawls was a strategist, a writer, a woman who survived decades in a business that rarely protects women. She began speaking openly about addiction, not glamorizing it, but dissecting it. She talked about cocaine, about Klonopin, about how easily creative people mistake self-destructs For inspiration. She admitted vulnerability without surrendering power. And younger artists noticed. She mentored rising musicians, encouraged women to write their own songs, control their own narratives, demand better contracts. She refused to let the next generation repeat her mistakes without warning. When the world shut down during the pandemic, she feared the unthinkable, that touring might be over for good. For someone whose identity was deeply tied to the stage, that possibility felt like erasure. But she returned, stronger, wiser, unapologetic. Her comeback performances weren't about reclaiming fame. They were about reminding herself that she was still here. Because the magic was never in the chiffon dresses or the spinning silhouettes. It was in her resilience. In her refusal to disappear quietly. In her ability to evolve without surrendering essence. The myth may have drawn people in, but the woman behind it, flawed, disciplined, scarred, enduring, is what kept them there. Today, she stands as the first woman inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Once with Fleetwood Mac. And once alone. That distinction isn't just symbolic. It represents survival. She didn't achieve it because she was the most polished, or the most predictable, or the most compliant. She achieved it because she endured the insecurity of being judged for her appearance, the betrayal of collapsing relationships, the addiction that nearly silenced her voice, the industry pressure that tried to package her into something smaller. She outlasted all of it, and maybe that's the real magic. Not the spinning on stage, not the lace gloves, not the mystique that made her seem untouchable, but survival. Because surviving in rock and roll, especially as a woman, requires more than talent. It requires stubbornness, vision, emotional armor. Her legacy isn't just measured in album sales or sold-out arenas. It's measured in influence. In the countless women who picked up a pen and thought, I can write my own story too. Chaos surrounded her career from the beginning, but chaos didn't define her. Resilience did. And that resilience became louder than any rumor, any scandal, any criticism that once tried to overshadow her work. At an age when many retire quietly, she still tours, still writes, still believes the next song could be her best. That belief is what separates legends from memories. She never chased fame, she chased feeling. The rush of a melody forming, the vulnerability of lyrics pulled from personal pain, the electricity of thousands of voices singing back words she once wrote alone in a room. Despite the heartbreak, despite the addiction, despite the isolation that often came with independence, she would choose it again, because music didn't just make her famous. It gave her identity. It gave her control in a world that constantly tried to reshape her. It gave her purpose when relationships fractured and industries shifted. And perhaps most importantly, it gave her freedom. Freedom to be unconventional. Freedom to age publicly without apology. Freedom to admit weakness without surrendering strength. When she steps onto a stage now, it isn't about proving she still belongs. It's about celebrating that she never left. The girl who once moved from school to school searching for belonging eventually found it, not in a person, not in a place, but in sound, and that freedom. She earned every single note of it.